Today on Rob's Garage, we're going to replace the driver front air strut on our 2016 L494 Land Rover Range Rover Sport. Welcome back to Rob's Garage. I'm Rob. This here's my garage where we maintain, repair, upgrade, and track the likes of BMWs, Chevrolets, Japanese motorcycles, and today, of course, we're working on the Land Rover. And by we, I guess I really mean me. Occasionally, my buddy Mike will help, featured my dad and one of my daughters in a couple of her videos, but for the most part, it's me. We've got the E92 M3 that we track here, produced a lot of videos lately about wrapping up the 2025 Bummer Challenge season. Also got an E90 daily driver. We've got a Chevy Corvette. We've got a Silverado, a Chevy Trax, Yamaha and Suzuki motorcycles. And on top of it, of course, today we're here for the Land Rover Range Rover Sport. But if any of those vehicles interest you, if you have one of them and you have maintenance or repairs or whatnot to do in the future, be sure to subscribe because chances are I'll have a video for you that may be beneficial. Now, bear in mind, I'm just a DIYer. I am not a certified mechanic. I just like to share my experiences with all of you guys because if I can do a lot of this stuff, I'm sure you guys can do it, probably do it better than I can. Today, we're going to replace the driver front air strut here. I started noticing as we were driving that the vehicle would start leveling itself out a lot more when it come to a stop sign or an intersection, and could tell it had to be one in the front. Of course, just by visually inspecting it now, at this point, with the strut completely decompressed of all air, you can tell that it is this side here. But let me walk you through the diagnosis procedure so that before you order an air strut, you know which one you need to replace. We will start by turning the ignition on. I'm going to raise the vehicle up. It's currently in normal height, raising it to off-road height. Then we're going to put it into neutral. You can put it in low range gear, back into park, and then we'll let it sit overnight. And in the morning, we'll see which of the four is lowered, and that should tell us which air shock is out. I'm suspecting it's one at the fronts. Look, immediately I exit the vehicle, and I can hear something. I can hear some air, and it's coming from the driver front. That is a serious air leak there. I've never heard it so pronounced. So we know we're going to need to replace the driver front. But let's take a look in the morning. You can see visually what it looks like. Let it sit overnight and came outside. You can clearly see that we were right. The front strut on the driver's side is bad. If you look down at the wheels, notice how close that fender well is to the tire, whereas on the passenger side it's still up in the off-road height. Once you've determined which of the four air struts needs to be replaced, you're going to need to go online or go to a store and order the correct strut. You can buy brand new OEM, you could buy remanufactured, which is what I've got here, but you need to make sure that you've got the correct strut for your system. So if you've got the electronic dampening control, I think it's called dynamic in this vehicle, there's a different option you need to purchase. I've replaced both with OEM, genuine Land Rover parts, as well as remanufactured here from Arnott. So if you need some advice on how to determine if you should go with the genuine OEM Land Rover part or a remanufactured part, such as this one from Arnott, know that the OEM is going to last longer and it's going to be more reliable. I can tell you that from personal experience. On the other hand, it's more expensive and doesn't come with quite the same warranty that some of these remanufacturers will come with. So let me give you a history on my vehicle. I've never had to replace any in the rear. I've replaced the fronts multiple times, okay? So starting with the passenger front, I first replaced that at 76,000 miles with a remanufactured version from Arnott, and it came with a lifetime warranty. But 27,000 miles later, I found myself stranded on a trip and had to pay a shop to replace it, and they had them do it with an OEM version. So right now, I've got an OEM strut in there. It's lasted 23,000 miles and no issues. The driver front, I have replaced once at 102,000 miles. So the OEM lasted 102,000 miles on the driver's side, only 76,000 miles on the passenger side. But I replaced it with an R0 remanufactured version instead of an OEM, and here I am only 24,000 miles later needing to replace it again. So definitely remanufacturer is going to be less expensive, may come with a lifetime warranty. I think R0 stopped supplying these lifetime warranties because they had so many issues with them, but I bought mine long enough ago that I've got lifetime warranties for both struts and front. Just so happens I've got a genuine Land Rover part on the passenger side at the moment, but I've got a backup. If you are mechanically inclined and you're willing to do this procedure periodically, perhaps as frequently as every 25,000 miles, get yourself a remanufactured. If it's got a lifetime warranty, you'll never have to buy the part again, but you'll be doing the work repetitively. Whereas if you go with the OEM, it's going to last you potentially up to 102,000 miles in my example. If I call from memory correctly, here's all the tools you'll need to do this job. If there's any additional that we come across during the course of the process, I'll mention in the video. Starting off, you're going to need a jack to raise the vehicle up, a jack stand to hold it in place, a couple wheel chocks to put around your rear wheel to make sure it doesn't move. I've got a pair of torque wrenches. You may only need one, but you're going to need a range from 30 nanometers to 185 nanometers. And in my case, I don't have one that has that type of range, so I've got two to pick from here. Using half-inch drives, breaker bar, some extensions for my ratchet. I've got sockets here ranging from 10 millimeter, 13 millimeter, 15 millimeter, 18, and 21 millimeter, as well as some open-ended wrenches. We may or may not need this 12. Definitely going to need the 15, the 18, and the 21 millimeter. I've also got this little separator here that I use on BMWs, some other European vehicles. It's never been too handy for the Range Rover, but I'll have it out just in case. You may or may not need it, but you're definitely going to need at least a long flathead screwdriver. Land Rover has a specialty tool for this job, but I've been able to complete it without that specialty tool, just using a really thick flathead screwdriver. You're gonna have to get in there and pry the knuckle, the steering knuckle off of the strut. You'll see soon enough. But sometimes you can use a separator like this to help out too. Of course, whatever socket you need to remove your wheels, have on hand. Just in case, make sure you've got a 4-inch C-clamp and a rubber mallet, because that same bolt I was referring to, where you have to kind of spread it away from the air strut, I've also in the past had to kind of reclamp it down and get it tight before I torque it, just to get the bolts to line up. And you probably have an impact driver. I'm just an amateur, so I use a drill here with the socket adapter, and it works fine. But I find the drill is just helpful to kind of expedite the process. The wheel lug nut's just loose. We've got two options for raising the vehicle up to get a jack stand underneath. One, you can go right here in the rear. Let's see what I'm doing here. There we go. And we can raise it all the way up. Okay, got it raised up high enough that I could get a jack underneath the front here, decent height. Right there, you're going to want to make sure you've got enough room for the wheel to come off. But you could also jack it up here in the frame. Hard for me to point to right here, but up in there. Now, before we get too much further, let's disconnect the electronics up here. I think this is only if you have the dynamic supercharged model. Oh, it looks like we got to replace some struts on the bonnet here, on the hood. That thing just started to fall on me. So, hey, subscribe. I'll make a video of that next. So before this thing falls on my head, you're going to squeeze the tabs here. It's pretty simple. You just squeeze left and right there and pull straight out. Take note of the orientation there. It does go in only one way. And then I'm going to use a 12 millimeter to actually take the nut off of here. But one thing to keep in mind, you got to make sure that your system is depressurized. So as you can tell from my diagnosis, this strut has got no air in it. So I feel comfortable taking the hose off. But if you had any pressure or air in your system here, then you're going to want to depressurize it using a diagnostic tool, a scan tool of some sort, to get the pressure out of the strut before you disconnect this line. Okay, so the first tool I forgot to mention at the beginning is a set of needle nose pliers. Why? You will need them when you pull this out to remove this little coupler in the bottom here. Kind of have to take the needle nose pliers and pinch this little opening bigger so that you can then slide it down. That'll come down and then slide this brass fitting off. The air hose itself, mine is getting a little beat up now. This is the third strut that's been installed or will be installed on here. So you want to inspect your line a little bit. If you've got any cracks or holes in this line, you're going to need to replace it because otherwise you won't be able to pump up the system. Mine looks okay from here, and when we diagnosed it, I wasn't hearing any leaks anywhere else, so I'm going to go with it for now. Back underneath, here's the sequence we're going to go through to remove the strut. First, you've got this bracket right here. Then we've got the end link. We're going to remove this bolt here. Then we're going to loosen this nut on the bottom here, the bottom of the steering knuckle. Then we'll come up here and remove this bolt connecting to the control arm right here. And then the big one is right here, taking that bolt out, spreading that right here so that we can then lower the steering knuckle and then take the strut out. The final step will be removing the top nuts from the strut up in the engine bay. So starting with this bracket, it takes a 10mm socket. And this is just so that the brake lines don't get compromised while we're maneuvering things here. And on the back, I'm going to lift this out of here. This is just a brake sensor wire. I'm going to lift it out of its mounting location. It mounts here with this groove right there. I'm just taking it out so it can just hang freely. And now we've got a 21mm socket here on the end link. You're gonna need this long breaker bar just to get it broken started. And then you're also gonna need a T50 Torx bit. Oh, I forgot to show that in the intro too. T50 Torx bit, you'll end up holding it in there, but we'll get to that in a minute. First we need to break this loose. All right, so you just kind of loosen that up. If you sit there and keep spinning it, you're just going to be spinning this bolt with it. So now we got to get our T50 Torx bit. That's going to go sit over that. You're going to hold that in place while removing this nut with an open end 21mm. Eventually that nut will come right off. Slide this bracket off. You can see there's a little groove here that bracket slides into. Okay. We need to get a jack place underneath the steering knuckle and raise it up a bit. Position just right underneath the steering knuckle. And we'll get it just resting up there. Perfect. And what's going to happen is I raise the jack, you'll see that bolt for the end link kind of straighten out like that. And now hopefully we can pull it out. Yep, just pulls out with ease. So now our end link is disconnected. Very good. And we're just going to hold the jack right here, set it tight. This one's hard for me to get a good camera angle in, but I showed you earlier the bottom nut here. Put a 21mm open end wrench on this side and then kind of position it against the wheel of my jack. So I didn't have to hold that. It would just kind of, as I'm loosening the bolt from the other side, it's holding this nut on by pushing against that wheel. And I use both arms with this breaker bar and the 18mm socket to break it free. It's loose, it's not removed. I just wanted to loosen it so we've got some play here. I've got a 13mm socket on this side with the breaker bar, 15mm open end on this side. We're gonna use the breaker bar to loosen this bolt out. take a little bit of time. Once we've broken it, you can grab the drill and remove it all the way. Drop the light. There we go. And you see that thing starts to pop right out. You know, once we remove that control arm, and I saw this thing move, I realized, oh, there's one more bolt here we might want to remove because it's holding the actual brake line. And I don't want to put stress on the brake line. You'll see back here, it's like very tight. So I failed to mention this earlier. I failed to do it earlier. It's an 8mm socket, just this little thing. So remember, we removed like the brake sensor wires and probably this bracket right here. I'm sure it has like the wheel speed sensor on it too. But let's take this one off. There we go. And now that brake line can kind of just hang free. The most difficult of all, and you'll see why, is because we have to spread this open. But we'll start with the 15mm socket with that breaker bar and the 18mm wrench on the other side to hold it. We gotta break this bolt loose. Drop our light in the process. There's just nowhere good to hang a light under here. Yeah, I do have an LED one, but I'm old school, okay? The bolt's not hard to get out. It's rather the easy part. The hard part is separating it so we can pull the strut out. This, my friends, is probably the hardest part of the whole job. Take a long flathead screwdriver, get it in here. You gotta separate. Land Rover's got a special tool made for doing this job. I don't have it, I've not needed it. You gotta get it loose enough where this can pull down your strut staying up here attached to the top nuts. And we'll disconnect those top nuts once this seal is broken. I thought we could just do it by loosening this bolt on the bottom. But the more I look at it, I think it's just better just to remove it all together. So again, the bottom is being supported by the jack. It's not like it's gonna fall on us. That long bolt. Just thought, let's just loosen that all together. And now we can play around with separating this here and then just pulling this wishbone looking thing down. Be careful not to hurt yourself. Just keep separating it. Dropping your light, cracking your bulb. There you go, LED light out. What I'm trying to do is just move that screwdriver left and right with one arm. Be careful not to like have it slip out and hit me. And then in the process, I'm kind of just like using the other arm to pull it down. We're getting close. Almost there. It's hitting the bottom of the steering knuckle, just ever so slightly. So we're gonna lower the jack a little bit. See that? Just a little bit. Still supporting the knuckle, but I need to create a little more room. There we go. I've got to lower the jack a little bit more. All right, there we go. Now you can see this hanging like so. And our strut is ready to come out. I've already broken these nuts loose. And I'm gonna keep this one most tightened among them till the very end. If we loosen all these nuts here from the studs, the strut is just gonna fall down to the ground. I'm using this left-handed. I'm gonna reach my right hand into the wheel well here. I'm gonna hold the strut. And when it gets close to the end, the thing's gonna wanna fall, and I'm gonna have to use both hands to pull it out. There it goes. Get both arms in here. And just kind of slide it out like that. Yeah, we've got our new air strut to install here. And a couple things to take note of. Your air line will be toward the outer side, okay? And this groove right here, that's the groove that knuckle thing goes around, that wishbone shaped thing goes around. So you'll know that's the correct way to slide it in. You just need to line the holes up there, just like so. I gotta hold it with one hand until I get a nut on the top. So I'm gonna move up top, and I'm gonna use the original nuts because they've got big flanges on them that I like, as opposed to what came with these remanufactured struts. So I can just get one started here. I can show you. There you go. Here's the original nuts. And they just have these big flanges, which I like compared to the ones that came with it. So I'm just getting them started by hand here. Wait to torque them until everything's on the car and it's resting on the level ground. Electrical connection here and the airline hose. I'm gonna wait to install those until the very end, just because I don't want the system to come on and start pressurizing it while we're still working down here. I'll see if we can get this wishbone thing back up on the strut. Lower it a little bit more. I got this just pushed up just barely enough so that this ridge right here is entering the separated area of that wishbone. And then what I did is I lowered the jack to the point where I could slide our bottom bolt way down here. I've slid that bolt in there so it lined up through the holes. I don't have the nut on the other side yet. We'll do to that in a minute. But the reason I'm doing this is because now I can raise this up for it to slide right up the strut. See that? Double check, make sure you don't have any brake lines in the way. Raising it all the way up till it gets to that rib. And now we can put that nut on the bottom. Again, we're not torquing this down, we're just so it's on. We'll torque everything down once we're finished. We've got our bolt that goes through here, through that wishbone thing. I was able to slide it right through, no problem. But the reason I suggested earlier to have a clamp handy, because if you separate it too far, you're gonna have to kind of squeeze that together so that the bolt will go through there. So 15mm socket, and get our 18mm open end wrench here. Kind of hold it in place. Do it by hand just for a second. I'll get the drill out. Oh, that's pretty good. Next up, we've got this control arm here. So you can tell that it's way low. And it's because we need to raise our jack up to get it into position. So I'm straddling the jack and using my left arm to kind of align the steering knuckle into the control arm, and then my right arm to raise the jack. There we go. Positioned. We'll stick our bolt back through here, and it should line up just perfectly. 13mm socket up front, and 15mm open end in the rear. All right, next up, we're gonna get our end link put back on. So the end link is gonna come through this hole right there. All right. Then this bracket slides over, holds in that little groove. We're gonna put a T50 Torx socket through there, and then just use a 21mm open end to tighten it down. And like I was saying earlier, we'll torque all these bolts once it's down on the ground. Last, we've got our brake lines here. So the one, you can see here, that was the actual brake line. Mounts in there with that 8mm socket. But that holds the actual hydraulic line up. Okay, 10mm. It's this bracket right here. And don't forget the brake pad sensor right here. You know, slide it back into its groove. All right, so we'll tighten that down. That's good. Lower it all the way. Good shape. Before we put the wheel on, we'll just cover off for the wiring harness here to go in. And just don't force it, you just twist it around until you feel it's going in right. Push it, you'll hear it click. Really simple. And we got the cover for the air hose. And this will just stick in here. And it's going to be like a press fit. Push it all the way, and then try to pull it up. Make sure it doesn't come out. When you know that it won't come up, then you know it's in good. Let me just give you the torque specs now. Up top, the top nuts are going to be 30 Newton meters. Going from the top down below. The control arm up here, this is 60 Newton meters. That wishbone thing, that is 95 Newton meters. The end link, that's 185 Newton meters. Down below is pretty big too. That bolt, that is 100 Newton meters. And then you've got to turn it another 240 degrees. So that's your torque specs that you'll apply once the vehicle's on the ground. I'll put the wheel on, and before I torque it down, of course, I'll lower to the ground, but just as a reminder, you want to make sure you install and torque the lug bolts in a crisscross pattern. And these get torqued to 105 foot-pounds. I don't know what that is in Newton meter. I always do my wheels in foot-pounds. Now let's raise up the jack a little bit more so we can get our jack stand out of there. Remove the jack stand. Start it up. And we're going to raise the vehicle start to see it level out. There we go, look at that, boom. Very good. Let's get an off-road height. Off-road height selected. It's moving up. Exactly what we want. Well, that's much better. I'm not hearing any air leaks. And look at that. We have height. There you go, guys. That's about a wrap. I've got a jack stand underneath in case the suspension decides to drop on me for some weird reason while I'm torquing the bolts down. It is in off-road height, and I've got the wheel turned full lock to the left. So I'll be able to get back in there and access most of the bolts pretty well. May have to turn it full lock to the right to get maybe one in the bottom. We'll see about that. Hope you found the video beneficial. If you did, do me a favor, like it, and do yourself a favor. If you've got Range Rover or BMW or Chevrolets, or you're interested in racing or Japanese motorcycles, be sure to subscribe so you can get future content. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'll see you on down the road.